Alright, hello and welcome to the second session of the modeling streams, where last time around, this is where we left off. We have made some decent progress with the model, where we've got the head completely done. This is as far as we're going to go with the head until we start texturing, and then eventually, I want to say, towards the end of the model, once the texture and everything are going to be done, we're going to be adding a tongue and teeth. And then we got started on the hair, and on today's docker, it's going to be a lot more hair. I'm thinking that hopefully today, in this time slot, that's going to be anywhere from 3 to 4 hours, I imagine, we'd ideally get the rest of the hair done. Now, that depends a lot on the complexity of the hair. If I switch back to the back view, I'm a little bit worried about the actual back hair itself. It looks very complex, especially from here, and there's like not a whole lot of reference in how that hair is split. So that might be one of the reasons why we're not going to be able to fit all of this hair into an episode or a session of its own, and we might need to continue it some other time. But I'm going to try my best to get through all of the hair in this session so that we can then move on to working on the actual body itself and be completely done with the head until we need a texture and start doing things like rigging and so on. So I'm going to pick back up exactly where we left. I want to do this piece of hair over here that kind of tucks in over there behind the ear. That's done. But what I want to do now is do the other side, which is not exactly mirrored. It's a very different curve. It starts higher up, but it does still tuck in behind the ear. So what we can do is that even though we did not mirror this other side piece over here, I am still going to give it a mirror modifier for the time being. Just move it over here. Apply the mirror immediately. I'm going to select our actual currently working piece of hair here and separate it into its own thing. I'm going to keep its name as the original one, and then the copy is going to be called 0.001 for the time being until we're done putting it in the right place, and then we're going to rename it accordingly. So I'm going to need to move this edge to where we get that much steeper curve towards the back of the ear, where about maybe hereabouts is where it would land. Now this spikiness over here, I'm gonna ignore that for the time being, just completely, because I can actually show it. With the resolution we've got right now in our hairpiece over here, it would be impossible to get that kind of an effect going. If I hide everything else, you can see that that's very difficult. And in order to get that kind of spikiness in a subsurf, you'd have to add like a loop there and another loop there, and then this would have to be brought in. And even that is not as spiky as we would want. And if I tab out, you can see that our try count, now with those loops and only one spike made over here, is 33,300 triangles. If I undo all the damage I did right there, and go back, we can see that adding that one singular spike would have bumped our triangle count up by 300, and now, in isolation, 300 triangles is pretty much nothing. We're going to wind up, before we start lowering our subdivision counts, we're going to wind up in the ballpark of 150 to at least 200,000. So, in isolation, 300 triangles is nothing. But then when you consider that, looking at the reference, we'd need 1, 2, 3, and probably 4 of these spikes. That adds up to 1,200 triangles. And if I Well, okay, I can show this as well. If I apply the subsurf, we get suddenly a whole lot more detail over here. And now all of a sudden we can, without the subsurf, do that. And we've got a much more pleasing spike as well. It's not as smooth. So I'm going to return our subsurf by just undoing. Realized that screencast keys turned itself off again. That's going to happen throughout the entire thing, unfortunately. I'll try to stay on top of it, but I promise nothing. And then just kind of to compensate for the fact that we have brought this edge in much further to make this triangle over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the inner edge in as well to make it wider. And this will help us cover a lot of scalp. Because if we're looking at the character from this kind of an angle, for example, the side hair that we're about to be adding this session is going to help with this a lot as well. But it's like, with hair like this, long, especially around the back, just heavy, it is straight as well. There's going to be some gaps here and there with all the separation of the individual strands or clumps of hair. But when you're looking at the character from the side, from here, for example, or from here behind the ear, you're not really going to be seeing a whole lot of skin color. Like, maybe a little bit here and there peeking through. But this is something that this piece of hair is going to be very important for. And then our eventual, like, hair shell that flows into our back hair. Those are the two main pieces that we're going to be using to cover up a lot of skin tone here. To the point where I might end up taking this and pulling these verts over here as well to make a much smoother curve and covering a lot more scalp. But right now, I'm fine with leaving this as is. These pieces could be a lot thicker as well. The solidify could be bumped up, but I'm going to worry about that later. See if that's warranted, and then just kind of try and glue this onto the skin so that we don't end up with any kind of an air gap. Does this have the... yeah, it does have the material because we cloned it. So if I go to material display for a second, these kinds of air gaps here are what I'm trying to get rid of. And another way to deal with those kinds of air gaps would be taking our actual head here and just selecting like the top of it and all the parts that are going to be covered in hair. And adding our hair material over here. And just having it be like that, so there wouldn't be like a clash of colors. But I kind of prefer going through manually by hand and just making sure that there might be some air gaps, but I'm trying to make sure that they're not terrible, like they're not too wide. And just keep on adjusting this. Try and make sure that nothing's poking through either. That's one of the reasons why I maybe want this to be a little bit thicker in the long run. That would be... it would make getting rid of these gaps, and also it would make making sure that none of the skin is actually poking through the middle of our hair a little bit easier. But I'm sticking with this for now. So that's about where I want... this can be even further down, because we can see that this strand kind of continues over here, and then tucks in behind the ear. So even though our ear is not exactly where it is in the reference, I still want this to run close to how the reference does it. I'm even going to extrude that a little bit and have a kind of a natural ending over here. There. And then in rendered mode, I can also check to see if, like... yeah, there's still some gaps. But that'll be fine. One thing I forgot to do last time is while I enjoy the rendered view of the character, even at this stage, you can see a little, if I zoom in, you can see a little bit of kind of this bleeding effect over here, just light bleeding over there. So what I wanted to reduce that is go to my object settings and then cycle setting here at the bottom and disable diffuse, and that means that we're only going to get the shadow from here. So I'm going to do that for all of my pieces. I can actually tell that in rendered view, I'm going to switch away from rendered view for this. I can actually tell that OBS was struggling with that one because it was actually impacting like my Blender as well. Because I've got cycles, and so Blender by extension rendering with the GPU, and then I've also got OBS processing the stream on GPU. So now that I've turned off the diffuse setting on all of my objects, I'm not getting that like reflection and so on anymore. That kind of a reflection would be nice for if you're working on any kind of like scenes and buildings, something like that, but not necessarily for characters, because again, it would be this piece. If I enable diffuse there, maybe it's not that piece, but rather the head. Okay, well, I'm not toggling them all back on, but you saw what I was talking about. So I don't want that to happen in my renders. That's going to be especially noticeable once we start getting down to like... Well, there's not very many bright pieces of clothing, but still, something like cleavage, for example, will look just like kind of unnatural with that kind of glare. If we want any kind of like detail and definition in our cleavage, we're going to have to add that on texture level. So, I'm happy with this. I don't want to do anything further with this piece over here until I have the back of the hair, or the side hairs, to kind of tell how far up over here this piece needs to extend. So it's fine being here for now. So I'm probably going to be adding this piece now, because we kind of have the point where that comes from. And that'll just be another nice and easy strand of hair to add, so I'm going to go with that. Gonna, first of all, rename this piece to be hair side, I guess it would be left lower. And then hide everything other than our head. And add our starter plane again. Delete everything. And turn on our snapping. And like I did with the other strand, like this one over here, I don't want to have subsurf on immediately, and I can't mirror this, so no modifiers for now. So I'm gonna start off like this, just snap it kind of to the point where it still would be at least close to sticking to the head, and then from here on out I can just extrude all the way to the end. And then here we have a kind of a twist to the back. Fill all of that in. Make sure that it is facing the right direction. Now it is. And then smooth it out. And now we can add our subsurf. Double and enable the edit mode view. It's a little bit hard to see, unfortunately. It's such a small strand and we're a bit zoomed in. But this is, after we're done with the face, really, none of this is an exact science anymore. It's more like having a reference and being able to trace a reference is nice. And it works fine for now, while we're working on like a frontal area. But like I said, once we get to about here, once we get beyond this strand of hair right here, or this clump of hair that's very clearly visible, it's all just going to be, I'm going to be taking very many creative liberties. Just kind of putting strands here and there. And same for the back. We don't have any kind of a reference of how the back hair looks all the way down here. We have no idea where these, like, green and pink strands are coming from, apart from the fact that they seem to continue all the way to the back of the head. So, that's just going to be improvisation at that point. But for now, while I still can, I'm trying to match things as closely as possible. I'm going to want another extrusion here so that I can get a nice little point, including this curve. Okay, that shows up. Yeah, sometimes when I'm, like, selecting things and grabbing and then right-clicking to drop the thing in place because I didn't like the way I grabbed it, I end up double right-clicking, and what that does is that puts my 3D cursor where I right-clicked. And the problem with that is if I add a mesh, that'll end up where my 3D cursor is. And we don't want that, because if I were to add a mirror modifier to this, the origin point for the mirror would be over the, would be along our z-axis at the moment, but then our mesh would be here, so our mesh would not be centered, so our mirror would be screwed up. So I'm gonna undo a couple of those steps. So how to fix this is Shift-C will send the 3D cursor, I want to say either back to origin or back to object origin, but yeah, Shift-C will return your 3D cursor to where it needs to be, so that any mesh you add to your scene, or anything really that you add to your scene, will have also their origin be in the 3D cursor. So this one's ready for a solidify. And I want to keep all of these pieces of hair about the same level of solidity at the moment. Like, this is something that can be tweaked later on if I decide that this needs to be thinner. But for now, until I see the whole of the hair, I want to keep it this way. So this, of course, needs to be in front, and I want it to have a little bit of curve. Kind of like this. And then from the side, this strand of hair is non-canon. So I guess we're doing whatever we want. I'm going to say that it curves pretty hard over here. Kind of like this. Maybe not exactly that hard. Maybe I want this to pull back a little bit. And the tip as well. Kind of like that. But yeah, I'll again see when the entirety of the hair, or at least the majority of the hair is done, just how straight this should be. Like, should it be more like this after all? And it'll also be, like, whenever we start making these clothes and so on, we'll kind of get a better idea of, is our collar maybe be around this spot? It shouldn't be, but we'll only find out once we're working on the clothes, actually. So I'm actually fine leaving it like this. And just make sure that it is tucked in somewhere here. And for now, it just kind of disappearing into our bigger clump of hair is completely fine. Once we're kind of combining our pieces of hair and starting texturing, we're going to try and find a more elegant solution to this. But I wouldn't count on it. It might just be dangling like this, and that's going to be completely fine. So I'm going to give that the hair material as well, and just take a look in rendered and see how it looks. It looks fine. I still think it could have more curvature, but not going to worry about that right now. There's another one of these that starts over here and goes a little bit shorter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy a piece of this strand and kind of just work from there. Just to kind of keep the amount of meshes we have over here a little bit more reasonable. It'll be nicer to kind of get around and find whatever you're looking for. So this all needs to be much closer over here. I imagine it's going to be a little bit rotated as well. Pull that in. And pull this out. Pull that in further so it kind of settles in there nicely. I do want another loop there. Now, this is where some reference sheets will have two side views, or, well, if they have mirrorable side hair, they might only have one side view. I've come across really, really good reference sheets where they'll have this side view, and then they'll have the other side view as well, so we will be able to see just how this strand looks from this side. Now we can't, so I'm going to have to improvise and say that it's not going to be much thicker than this here. And I'm simply going to try and have it match the frontal reference. Kind of like that. And just sort of have it exist over there. So I'm going to call this hair side left strands. And that doesn't really mean anything for us. We don't exactly care about that. It's more just like if I ever need to find a specific piece of hair, we'll be able to find it. So that's that one done. So now I kind of want to naturally move on to this here. It's going to add a lot of shape and detail to our hair. So for this one, I'm going to start on the side for the first time. Hide everything else. Have our plane. And snapping on. And just long strokes. Trace it over there. Kind of the same over here. And then from there, I've actually gone a little bit too far already. Gonna turn snapping off. And bring these over here, because it's going to be falling in a straight line, as we can see from both the front and the side. So I am going to have those be level, and then sketch out the rest of it. And flip the normals, give it a smoothing layer. And detach it from the skull. Then, let's have our subdivision surface again. And that's going to get rid of some of the blockiness and rectangleness that this hairpiece is supposed to have. So adjust for that fact. Try and keep our loops kind of rotated straight as well. And then it splits exactly once over there. So we split it exactly once. This is such a nice piece of hair to work with, like, not overly complicated. Just straight lines and then one nice little split. I'm not exactly sure what's happening here. It's like the very end of it, I think, splits a little bit. So for now, I'm just going to leave it sharp. And we can return here later, if need be. Like, can we see from... No, the end doesn't split. That's just some kind of a smudge over there. And then also, from the front, it looks like we've got another split over here. That's not present on the side. For this one, because we can see it more clearly from the side, even though the side is a more simplified drawing, I'm going to be using the side as my main reference. Like, I of course want to have the entire thing rotated like this and pulled over like this so that we can have the actual three-dimensionality to it. But then the fact that over here it ends about where, let's say, around the armpit and maybe like collarbone area, and then over here the armpit and the collarbone are just not really that well aligned. So if I want this to match the front, it's not going to match the side. So that's going to be another one of those things where I think I'm going to leave it the height that the front requires. And then later on, once we're kind of sketching out our body, if our body ends up clipping into this, or if there's a massive gap between our body and this strand of hair that clearly should be resting around this kind of like chest area, then I can go on and tweak that further. So see if we can kind of get a match on both angles. We can get a close match, and that's good. So this is kind of going to be our rough shape of the hair. Okay, this needs to be spikier, much spikier. And so does this. They do need to go even further down. So I'm just going to freeform a little bit here. Kind of like this. And then we need to fix this. Like, it obviously can't clip into the skull. So I'm gonna... I could bring this in a little bit. It looks a bit odd from this angle. Do the same over there. Yeah, I think this looks actually nicer. So that has alleviated some of it. But we do still need to pull this out. And as a result, we don't exactly have, yeah, this needs to cover a part of the eye. So we're going to have to compromise in this way as well. Like this. And then just kind of... like this, maybe. I'm going to add my solidify now, so that I can kind of see the amount of space that it would take up. Can I still make it a little bit more like this? Just have it be a little bit more rectangular. Smooth and scale that. And then scale that up as well. Okay, that's a little bit better, and it still kind of does cover the eye, but it still needs to be, because it runs all the way here very clearly. So these are the kind of problems, like this is one of those where I genuinely don't think there is going to be a solution to this. I'm just going to have to sacrifice some of the ref sheet accuracy, or I'm going to have to like sacrifice a little bit of the skull shape by smoothing that and smoothing the entire part here, which I'm like not all that happy about. That's just too flat. So can I maybe give it just one smooth and then one smooth over here? Yeah, maybe. I'll see if that does enough. I'm going to try and match the front reference as closely as possible this time. I'm just ignoring the side for now. And then I'm going to see if I can do anything to help with the side. Because from the side, we do kind of see that it's supposed to be very rectangular. And we do see that from the front as well. But it's just like getting it to a point where it matches both sides is going to be difficult. I'm going to grab this and just extrude another bit here, and that's going to help a lot with this upper part. And then from the side is, of course, way too forward. But I genuinely do not think there's anything we can do about that, because it would have to be like this. And that'll just make it clip back into the eye sockets. So I'm just going to do my best to make this as rectangular as possible from both angles, really. And then these are going to be curved in this direction. That should have another loop. And then as a result, this is going to be curved forward a little bit. And it's okay from the side. It's actually... I'd like to be able to see the eye from the side. So I'd really like to be able to bring this in like this. And kind of have it be a compromise like this. I think this is going to be about the closest we're going to be able to get. A little bit over. So now if I unhide everything, we're flipping into our lashes. That's not ideal. But we are supposed to be in front of this piece, so maybe like this. And it doesn't cover as much over here as I'd like. But it covers way too much over here. So again, just going to have to find a compromise that I'm happy with. I'd like to be able to see the eyes from the side. Kind of like this. But I do think the frontal view is going to be more important. I think this thing over here, this flat piece that we added that runs to behind the ear, is going to do a good enough job of covering up skin if I switch over here and give this the hair material. So I think this is about fine. And then bring this kind of in line with the endings of the other hair pieces. Like so. Then switch to rendered and see that, okay, it needs... To my eye, I'd say that it needs more curvature. But this is at the same time supposed to be a very, very, like, flat and rectangular piece. But it does have a little bit of rotation. So... I'm going to bring this in a little bit, give myself just a little bit more room to work here. I'm just going to sacrifice the side-eye. This is going to be more important than this. So now I'm just going to make everything kind of uniform and even. That still needs to have more of a curve. And then puff that out very slightly. And again, this is going to be a very flat piece where we can't see it from the side because the side isn't very textured, but from here, most of the detail of this piece of hair is going to be coming from our texturing work. Like this kind of like separation over here is not actually mesh level. That's something we're going to be drawing on. So I'm going to all that good. And it wasn't supposed to ever cover our ear. That's supposed to be done by the massive amount of other side hair pieces that we're going to be moving on to. So I'm going to leave that like that for now. It's going to be hair, side, right. And then what I kind of want to do now is I want to stick to the right side. And I'm wondering if I should sketch out the back hair first, or if I should try and attempt the other side pieces, because this one here is very clearly just the side still. But then I'm not 100% sure. This could be coming from the side or from the back. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the like very basic setup for our back hair first. So how I start off with the back of the hair is I just select kind of the section of the head that the back of the hair would be covering. So that would be including this. Maybe even these. No, I like the natural curvature of this more than the like blockiness of that. So I'm going to be starting with this. I'm going to duplicate that and have it be its own mesh completely with the hair shader. And then these areas will need to be smoothed out a little bit. I want kind of a natural looking curve from our ear towards the front of the hair. This is one of those pieces that I'm going to solidify pretty well immediately because it just looks nicer as this. And now it's a little bit more recognizable that this is going to be like the base layer of the hair. This is what is going to add a whole lot of just hair color to our head. And that's going to be... I hate this geometry that I can't like do a clean loop from here to here. But this is going to be the part of the hair that's going to be adding like the most volume of hair to our character. And yeah, it's good that it extends over here. This kind of like hair shell thing is another part that could be a lot thicker. But I'm going to leave it at 0.03 for 0.003 for now. Just ideally, But from over here, this is going to extend into the entirety of our back hair. And I'm not going to bother with this bit of exposed skin over there, because that's going to be covered up by pieces like this on the other side. And that's kind of why I wanted to have this back hair done now. At least the, like, basic rudimentary starting point version of it. So I can kind of have an idea of which sections of the head still need to be covered off. So this needs to tuck in behind the ear neatly. And now we can kind of tell that this here is going to wind up about here. And we're going to worry about connecting this or not connecting this to our back hair much later. If it's going to be covered up by other pieces, then I don't think there's going to be any need in trying to connect that. But if it's going to be visible like this, then I'd want to try and find some way of tucking it in neatly. I think, yeah, that playlist done. And then this back hair, this also needs to tuck in much more nicely. It can't just disappear like that. So it's going to be like this. Yeah, more like that. And then make sure that no skin is flipping through anywhere. This is also the part of our hair that would kind of like do this. This is where we fill out the rest of our reference. And you can see there's a lot of air between our skull and our back hair. And while we're up here, that doesn't really matter. But when I eventually need to do like this, it does end up mattering. It's going to look pretty bad for a long time until we can finally apply our solidify modifier after we're done rigging. So in a long time. And then we can go in here and like select these vertices and pull them in like this so that we have actual volume to this back hair. So I'm going to very roughly sketch out our back hair. So from the side, we can tell that that's about the volume that it covers. So just do something along these lines. And then if we look at our back, well, okay, our back reference doesn't have hair, but there's no way that it's this narrow. So I'm gonna stretch it out like this. And now we have a nice little veil that we will kind of turn into hair later on. We kind of have the bounds of where our back hair is supposed to be. And we have some very floating pieces here, where we can see that the back hair is supposed to be kind of this wide. So we can maybe rein it in a little bit. So kind of like that, and then have it spread more wide at the bottom. Kind of like this. And then there's not a whole lot we can do about the fact that it's just floating like this yet. Like I said, once we're done detailing out all of the, like, all of these thin strands over here, all of this, we're going to be able to go in, and once we've applied our solidify, we're going to be able to go in and, like, select these over here and just kind of pull them in. I can probably show that as well. So eventually, once we're done rigging, we can do something like this. And then that doesn't look very good, but we can just carefully start pulling pieces of the hair towards the back of the head. That'll give us a much more natural and smooth transition to this long back hair. We could also, if we wanted to, just add another one of these hair shell layers, but I'd like to avoid that if possible. So this part I'm still going to bring in, like, behind the ear. Kind of like this, and it's still mirrored, so that's fine. That does have hair already. So I think I'm fine leaving this like this for the time being. And I'm gonna focus on the sides now. So I'm trying my best to look for anything that could be mirrored. I think this strand and this strand, maybe, possibly, could be mirrored. Not 100%, there's differences. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the thing I did with this piece over here, where I'm going to, first of all, call this hair back. And once again, hide everything other than our head. That's what we're going to be using as a reference for where the hair's going to go. And I'm going to sketch it from the side. Now, we don't really have a reference for how that's going to be sketched from the side, so I'm just going to kind of have it go over here. That's going to be our starting point for this clump of hair. Bring it out. Fill it in. And do all the prep work like subsurf here. And then go to a frontal view. And remember to add our mirror. And kind of now sketch it out from the front, now that we've got a little bit of volume on the side as well. It's gonna look stupid from the side for a while. But we're just rough sketching at this point, and we're rough sketching by eye. So I know that there's no way this is that wide, and there's no way that this is that wide. And then just add our loop cut. It looks like the split happened somewhere up here already. So do it like this. Oh, did I? This is one of the issues of working with the wireframe. I'm going to undo all of that. I added. You can see from the side view that it has not gone to plan. So I'm actually just going to rotate this here and try again. So now, if I split this, and have it fit more closely over here. I do want another loop here so that I can get the spikiness. And then this gets very, very small towards the end, like this. And from the side, it still does not look very good, but we're going to worry about that right about now. So I'm going to solidify this. That's going to take a while. Misclicking some of these modifiers is very... Yeah, okay, that didn't take as long as I thought. But misclicking some of these modifiers is very dangerous. Like, you can genuinely crash your blender by just pressing the wrong modifier or pressing some... Like, in wave paint mode, for example, pressing the wrong button can just completely kill your pass. So these are still very close over there. And again, without a side reference, I'm just flying blind. Just making things that, to my eye, from the one angle of the reference sheet that I do have, look decent. And then from the other side, the side that we don't have a reference for, I'm just doing my best to make things look okay. So I want this curving. And then every now and then check back to your reference sheet to make sure that you are still matching the one reference you do have. Now this is going to be a bit interesting because I don't think this is going to be that detached. If we move it on the X... Yeah, no, it has to be that detached. So this has to be in front of the ear. Yeah, just undo that rotation. And okay, it does go all the way over here. We kind of see where it ends as well. Another loop here. Yeah, like so. And then go back to our side. And then kind of make sure that it also works with the rest of the hair. And this is about this point in time right here. You should be able to see why I despise hair. So how would this work? Right now I'm just kind of completely ignoring the frontal reference as well. Just going to say that, yeah, that's what that looks like. I don't know how it plays along with... Okay, that gap needs to be closed though. The one thing we can see from our frontal reference is that the ear barely peeks out from over here. So this has to be closed, and this has to be a little bit wider. That's poking through, so make sure that it's not anymore. Give this the material. And then let's see how that's actually worked with our mirror on the side. Surprisingly well, actually. Like, I'm going to apply the mirror now. And I'll work in the same mesh. So this just needs to be wider. And stretch out a little bit further. Like this. And like this. And then make sure that it looks okay from the side, and it does. So that's been a decent bit of a time save, being able to mirror that. But then... Let's see, which parts do we have, and which parts do we need? Gonna hide a bit of the frontal hair. So we have this and this. We need all of that. And then on the other side, we've just got this. So we need this and then all of that. And then what do we need to fill? We need to fill this. This is another one of those where I'd really love to have a side reference. Though I think I can move this. Just going to over here. Yeah, that's where that should be. And then it'll just cover this gap over here. Like this. And again, we're not going to care about the floating ends of the hair. That's going to be made look a lot nicer once we're done actually making the individual clumps of hair. Now, I think this would benefit a little bit from, again, that little bit of curvature here in the middle. And kind of the same thing for this. This is a little bit too flat. So do it like this, and then pull this back so that we don't have any kind of a gap here. I'm still not sure how this is going to integrate into the back hair over here. Like, if the back hair is maybe going to be doing something like this. Or if I'm just going to end up deleting a whole bunch. Maybe, like, just delete all of that. And all of that. Yeah, I think this is going to be the play going forward. Pull this further in, and then this further in, so that we don't have that gap over there showing scalp. I do need another loop here. And then again, this side we're gonna cover up with something along the lines of this. Alright, and then on this side, I'm gonna say that what we see here is gonna be our missing piece from over here. So, I don't think there's any real point in trying to, like, sketch these out from the frontal angle. So what I'm gonna do again is, first of all, what is our plane? That's hair side mirrored. I'm going to go to the other side view, add a plane, and just say that our, I'm going to subsurf this immediately, just going to say that our next piece of hair starts over here and goes like this, and then like this. And now we have a starting point. So I'm going to unsnap and bring it out like this, and then kind of see how that fits in with the rest of our hair. And immediately we're going to have to, between this, and this, we're going to have to fill this area of skin. So the main problem is going to be that this one's going to split into 3, maybe 4 different strands later on down the line. I'm going to solidify this immediately as not skin, but solidify, so that we have our reference thickness, so that we can see. I'm going to give it the material, so that we can see how it plays along with the rest of the hair here. So I think this I'm going to undo that, and then I'm finally going to apply the mirror on our back hair. And now I can work on this side and make this side flow more naturally without ruining the alignment and overlaps I've created on this side. So now this piece of hair here that we're working on can kind of go like this, and you can share a space. You can tuck in with this one. So this one's going to go further in here. And then this is going to follow closely. And again, this is all headcanon. I'm inventing this on the fly as I go because I have nothing. I have this little bit over there to work with, so if it ends up looking decent, that's all that matters. And then this needs to be brought down so that we don't see the skin from over there. Same for this. Or maybe this needs to be brought up a little bit, like that. And that, once again, doesn't look very good at the moment, but then once we're kind of done with all of these individual pieces of hair, we'll be able to start, connecting them together. And then now we can kind of tell that this is supposed to go about here and be about this wide. Except rotated like this and then made about this wide. So this needs to account for the gap that we've created over there. And then this splits into at least 3. I'm going to say here, here, and here. Actually, that's 4, so we can get away with 1 less. Yeah, okay, so here, and here. They're all curving towards the body. So I want them rotated like this. Not that hard, though. Or maybe more like this. And then now this can regain some of its volume on this side. And also on this side. And this is going to be a little bit shorter. We'll add some layering to it. And this one's going to curve a lot harder to the point where I'm going to add another loop. Bring this back in line with our back of the hair. Add another loop to help with that. Right now this just kind of disappears, so what I want to do is I want to have it follow along the edge here. And then I'm just going to leave it kind of stranded over here. Yeah, there's no clean way to rotate that or anything, so it just tucks in over there. And then, honestly, beyond this, I have no idea what to do with this. If I hide everything else, I can kind of get an idea of... These need to be curved even harder. And that this could have its own loop cut here as well. And then turn more like this, and this became a little bit wider. And so would that, and so would this. I do want this to be the closest to the body still, though. So kind of like this, maybe. And then I don't really care how it looks from, like, how it matches the front reference anymore. Because that's not a whole lot of help at this point. It's more about how it fits the entire rest of the hair. So there's a big old gap over there. So I kind of want to bring all of this closer without clipping into this. And then just try and naturalize all of the curves. This might be something that benefits from a smooth, by the way. If I give that a double factor and triple repeat smooth. And then see for a second what that would be. I'm going to solidify after smoothing as well. And then just kind of buff all of these out. Keep them as spiky as we can. Okay, I don't think smooth is going to help a whole lot. I'm just going to keep it like this. And this gap worries me. So I'm going to say that towards here, we're just not going to be as detached. And this does need to be a little bit spikier. So does this. Just kind of trying to get as many angles of this as possible. And this is once again going to be something that benefits a lot from the fact that later on, we're going to be able to buff it out and give it a little bit more volume than the 0.003 we've got right now. Because I could do that right now, just give it more volume to about that kind of a degree, but it would look out of place. So I don't want to do that at a solidify level, but I'd rather want to do that once I've applied my solidify modify. So at this point, now that we've kind of covered the sides as well, I think the other side is still going to have one of these in there somewhere. Because yeah, over here we've got this, and then we've got this, and I'm going to say that's going to be part of the back hair. But I don't think this here, I think this might be part of the back, but even though this is further back, I think this might be part of the side or something along those lines, so. Or maybe this is part of the side. But the point is that I do think that there is still a piece over here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mirror to this as well. And do the same thing we did earlier. Just immediately apply that and have this on the other side. I am going to make a little bit of room by making this a very narrow starter up here. Kind of like this. And then I can pull this in. Actually, I can delete the topmost loop. We don't need that anymore. Narrow that down. Kind of slot it in over here. And then make a totally original piece of hair. By flipping this short, having it curve the other way. Clipping that short as well, having it twist a little bit in this direction and then continuing on. and pulling this further back. Kind of like this, and giving it a little bit of a twist as well. Which I don't like, so I'm going to return that and twist it in the other direction. And again, just kind of jiggling things around to try and catch any issues like this over here. So that would be this. Give that a smooth and things will look a little bit better. Maybe even give like both of these a loop cut so it's going to be buried better. And then give this a little bit of depth by bumping it out like so. And then also making sure that it doesn't stray too far over there, which means that I'm just going to undo all the bumping I just did. And then do the same to the one we copied from. A slight bump. Not that big. A slight bump. Then let's take a look and see if there are any gaps anywhere. There's one. So most of these gaps would be fixed when I start joining these pieces of hair together. But that's going to be... We're still far enough away from that happening. But I kind of want to fix these at a mesh level first. So that things will just kind of look nicer while we're working on other stuff. That's still poking a little bit. So is this. And we don't care about the back hair at the moment still. We're still working on the front and the sides, so... I am going to... render that for now. And yeah, we get a very harsh edge over here, where all the pieces of hair meet. And then our back of the hair also begins. So I'd like to do something about these now. I'd want these to, like, be better hidden. And I'd also kind of like this gap to not exist as obviously, so close that a little bit. Kind of same for this. That gap is fine, that should exist. That gap is not fine. So I think I just hide that over there. I can't bring this that much further down. I actually kind of want to have that curve be less pronounced, so I'm going to have these stretch a little bit further. Not a big fan of adding this extra loop, but it had to be done. This pink also needs to be visible all the way, I think. This has to be above here. This shouldn't clip. But it also should not be showing skin. And then this also should not clip. And I've said this a couple of times already during the first two sessions, but this, as opposed to the actual process of making the geometry and so on, this is going to be by far the biggest time sink. Just going through and doing minute adjustments to make sure that things look okay. At least to your eye. Most of these things that I'm fixing right now are going to be very obvious right now with our very basic shading system and just basic materials and so on, but would not be as noticeable once we're done with our texture and with combining all of these hair pieces to just one. But any work I do here is going to make the combining process a little bit easier, so that's kind of what I'm doing all this for. That's a bit too big of a gap, so fill that in somehow. And now hit it with another render and see. There's a bit of a shadow over there, so that means there's going to be a bit of a gap as well. This has a very harsh ending, so that needs to be fixed. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how this is going to end up. Because over here, it kind of naturally flows into the little crease in the hair over here. It's going to be hard to convey in 3D space. I think I can make it like tiny like this and then flow in like that. It's going to look a lot nicer once again. Once we're not doing like renders like this, where we're getting natural shadows. It's going to look a lot nicer when we're doing renders with our shade, like with a shadeless shader using our texture, and we're going to be able to define at a texture level the shadows we want. Right now, the shadows are going to be very harsh, and we can clearly see all of the individual pieces of hair and any possible like errors and areas that are just not shading as nicely. But once we're done, we're going to be in charge of deciding how things are going to be shaded, because we're going to be drawing those shadows on our texture. Yeah, this clump has to be on top. So, kind of like that, and then and that gap is unfortunate. I guess I can do it like this, and we'll have the tiniest little bit of clipping over there. I'm not 100% happy with this over here. On the other side, it's a little bit smoother. There's a gap here. So I kind of want to hide a couple of those. Smoothing is not going to do it for me here. I'm going to have to manually drag these and make a nicer curve. It's not as pronounced. And then hide these and kind of rejig the entire system. Our back hair also stands out very much when we're doing angles like this, where our front hair is individual clumps, whereas our back hair is just a smooth blob at the moment. But we're gonna help that a little bit later on as well, like making the individual pieces of back hair from this massive block. And then another thing we can do is just like have this, and then I guess this, and just add a little bit of bumpiness and flow that way. I think that's that playlist done. Okay, that is solidified. I wonder how that looks in rendered. So that disappears nicely. So I wonder if I would be able to do the same here. Kind of like this. Yeah, I guess that's fine for the time being. It's gonna look a lot nicer when we have that little crease over here. Focusing on this strand here right now, seeing if it maybe would need a little bit more curve, or if it would need to be a little bit closer to the face. And I'm going to try. I'm going to bring it a little bit closer to the face. Like this. And then fix the clipping here. Yeah, I think that's nicer and more in line with what we want. It's bending a little bit too much for my liking, though. It needs to be straight. So I'm looking for something more like this, but without the clipping. The shape of a head could be a little bit better as well, if I can figure out how to. I think there's a hotkey for that. Yeah, the shape, like this should be a little bit more puffed out. Like, right now, the front hair is so much further forward than the sides. Which is not really representative of how the skull is. So I wonder... Yeah, the front hair is just floating, so... Well, it's layered as well, so it's floating really far in front. So what I want to do is... Even though the side reference has it kind of far to the front, I want to have it more evenly spaced. So I'm going to hide our side pieces. And kind of bring these back in closer towards the... Especially this here. This curve's a little bit too hard. Have it be more like this. I think the other one's fine for now. And then as a result, also bring this in further. And then do bring this in as well, because it's floating. Because it needs to be kind of behind that strand. Bring that in further. As a result, we bring this in further, which I had no idea this was floating in the first place. This needs to be closer to the skin. So that'll be part of the problem. Because this is the piece that runs to behind our ear. And as a result, is very close to the skin. Just naturally. And now, I can bring this a little bit further to the front. In an ideal scenario, our layering would have been fine from the get-go, and we wouldn't have to, like, relayer things like this. But with hair as complex as this, I find that rarely happens. So how far is that going to be in front? Not very far. Well, okay, I can take a look at the reference here. Yeah, by about here, this thing's going to be in front. So choose this. Bring it to the front. To the side as well a little bit. And now it's going to be much nicer looking at from the top. You're basically never going to be looking at the hair from an angle like this, but it's just nice to have, because now you can see that it's the front hair is not ridiculously forward. We don't have like a triangular skull shape based on our hair. We've got a much more nice and rounded shape. And even though the hair is now pulled a little bit further back and closer towards the actual forehead than our reference sheet, by this point, when we've gotten this far with the hair and the model in general, you can kind of stop worrying about being one-to-one with the reference sheet. Like, personally, for me, the reference sheet is really nice for the head shape, especially the side profile, getting the eyes in the right place, getting the mouth and the nose and the chin and so on in the right place. And then for the bangs, getting the bangs started, because the bangs are going to be one of those things that are kind of going to guide the rest of your hair around and tell you which direction to go with them and so on. So I'm gonna... I did all of this with proportional editing, so I need to undo some of the damage that proportional editing has done. So that's what I'm doing right now. Kind of, again, closing gaps and making sure that things flow smoothly. Which, again, if you look at the... I'm going to add a loop there. If you look at the hair right now, from this kind of an angle, especially in without material view, you can see that it's full of imperfections. Like, if I were to add a smooth, let's say 2-2 over here, you can see that it smooths out pretty nicely compared to this. I don't want to add a smooth yet, at least. Maybe when I've joined all of the hair together. But like I showed in the first session, these kinds of imperfections that you're able to see now, they're going to be less obvious when you have an actual texture for your model. So once we get started with texturing, all of these imperfections are going to start disappearing. And another way they're going to start disappearing is going to be when we move on, when our scene, our character contains more than just a head and hair. When we start having a body, clothing, something else to take our eyes away from the front hair and all of the imperfections in there. There's also a different, likely better method of doing hair. I'm trying to remember what the video for it would be called. I know the channel that has like an hour-long introduction into that method of using curves to do hair. It's called A Version of Reality. And it'll be something along the lines of modeling anime hair with lattices and curves. So, the benefit of the lattices and curves method is that you're going to be using curves. So, things are going to be curved nicely, naturally. Like, theoretically, you should be able to end up with a better result than lattices and curves using this method right here, just dragging around vertices by hand. But realistically, the amount of time and effort you'd have to put into, like, making a piece of hair like that, and then smoothing, and pulling it back to shape, and smoothing again, and so on, to hit the level of smoothness you can get with lattices and curves, the amount of time spent on that would be massive. It would probably look better in the end, but it would just take so much time that it's not worth. So I'm personally, at some point, I'm going to give that a try. I've been saying this for a long time. Once I'm free of aesthetics requests and personal projects that I have actually placed a deadline on for a while. So just puffing out these front pieces again so that we don't have like this kind of unevenness. Like this, for example, this is not very natural way. You have a dent, a bump, a dent, and a bump. I want a smoother flow of hair. I'm going to take these two loops and give them a smooth. These two, give them a smooth. That's done a lot for me already. And then I guess I want to bump these up very slightly for a more natural curve. Gonna have a render in here. Trying to tell better if there's anything wrong. There's a massive gap over there as a result of us having moved this side. There's also skin peeking through over there. Oh, it took me a while to realize that. Yeah, that is the eyebrows poking through. So I actually wonder if the eyebrows are connected. Yeah, they're floating as well. So bring these back in. Make sure that they're all kind of glued in there. Yeah, that's fine. And now they should be underneath the hair again. Okay, there's just going to be a gap there that I'm going to cover with this side instead. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to go about this seam at this point, but considering all of the frontal hair pieces are... Oh, there's skin poking through there as well. Alright, that's better. But considering all of these frontal pieces are tucked in underneath, I kind of want these to be tucked in underneath as well. So that's going to be difficult to accomplish. At least cleanly. It's going to be something like this. Yeah, you can see there's a big old gap over there. So I think I'm going to fix that as best as I can. And then I really need to move on to the back of the hair. So I don't end up spending way too long on the front for minimal gain. Another problem is that we can probably, yeah, we can see from the front that this does need to be bumped up like this. It's unfortunate that there's no vert anywhere here. I'm gonna have to pull this up instead. Kind of like this, and then there's little we can do about that gap for the time being. Could try bringing these further up here. Yeah, okay, we can patch that gap with these. But this is again one of those things where once we're able to apply the solidify modify over here, I'm going to be able to buff that up like this, and then we will not have this issue. Keep that at 003 for now. So I'm going to try and make any sense of the back hair now. Like the first thing would be kinda using the... I'm going to make that even smaller now. Would be kinda trying to piece together an idea of what we're working with from the very few bits of the hair we can see from the front, and then the very few bits of the hair we can see from the side. So we know that there's not a whole lot of rotation to it. and it becomes very thin towards the end. From this angle, it doesn't split into into too many individual pieces. But then we do know that from this angle that, no, yes, it does. We have very thin strips over here. I want to say the middle's not going to be as thin, but the sides especially are going to be thin strips. So I'm going to start sketching out things based on that knowledge. So it's going to be one of the long strands over there. And it's going to be this. So I'm going to try and see. Actually, before I do that, I do want to add a little bit of resolution to all of these. And give it a bit of a smooth. And yeah, now that we've got a little bit more to work with here, have it split about there. And it very clearly curves like this. And then it widens out. And it's almost attached over here where it connects. And I imagine this becomes very thin. Something along these lines. And that'll give us a basic idea of the saw thickness and direction and so on that we want from our back hair. I'm going to do just a couple preliminary cuts over here. So let's say that there's one of those. I want another loop here. Something like one of... Maybe not like that. Got it here as well. Maybe split here. That'd be sharp. After that, continue over there. It's further up. One of these, let's say this, goes in this direction. Okay, all of them flow towards the body, so it's going to go in that direction instead. We do know that we're going to have a bit of a curve here before everything starts curving back towards the body. Kind of like this. We do know that there's going to be another, either not as long or longer strip over here. It looks longer. I'm going to have it split about here, about as far up as we can. And do the same thing. It kind of curves in this direction. And try and match it over here. This would still be rotated a little bit. I want to say the entire strand would then be rotated. And then here, I'm going to say it's going to be behind the main body of the hair. So I need to reflect that for the entire duration. It's fine if it peaks, like it gets close to the main body over here, and then curves away. That's actually very aesthetically pleasing. So I'm going to keep it like this. And then the pink and the green are weird. Because I know that from context clues and information we have over here, for example, you can see that all the hair kind of bunches up towards this kind of area. So that's about where it's going to be ending. I don't think it's tied together, even though it flows to a tight stop over here. I would be surprised if it were tied together. And that's information that we'll just never get. The character artist never chose to include that kind of information in the ref sheet, and it's a VTuber model, so we never see the backside ever. So I'm going to choose to believe that it's not tied together and rather flows into an end where the tips are going to be about like this kind of an area. But what we can see is that this strand over here and this strand over here that almost look mirrored. Apart from the pink and the green, they're the only longer individual strands. So, man, the pink and the green. How I'm going to do them, and I'm going to do them now, is basically going to be over here. I'm going to select the part where this connects to the rest of the head. Just select our long strand and duplicate it. And have it be its own mesh. That's... I hate that I can't shrink fatten. Maybe I can when I've destroyed my modifiers. No, I can't. But yeah, this is basically going to be our pink and green. So they're going to start from... move that back to where our original strand was. They're going to start from somewhere over here. For now, they're going to be floating. It's not going to look very nice, but again, I promise that once we're done rigging the character and we can finally apply our solidify modifiers, this entire back hair is basically going to be solidified all the way out to like the nape of the neck. How you would imagine this kind of long hair flowing. So we can just tuck the ends of these into what will eventually become just a big old clump of hair going towards the neck. I'm going to make them thin. And again, the double A's or triple or quadruple A's in between me selecting things is just so that I can see where the individual vertices are. Because right now, it would be impossible to find any of them, but now they're easy to find, so... just make this very thin. Smooth it a couple of times. I'm going to have this be the pink, so I'm going to try and kind of follow along where the pink would be going. And then it ends up somewhere over there. I do want this to be turned a little bit like this, but then also still tucked in behind the main body of the head. And then turn the rest of this around as well, so that it's facing towards the front. Like this. And then once again try and match the flow of the pink. Kind of like that. And then over here we can see it again. We can tell that it's moved over here. So that looks kind of natural. And I'm just going to extend it up over here where from the frontal angle, it's going to be hidden behind the head to emulate our final scenario. So we already have a pink material, I believe. Yeah, hair highlights. So now that looks all nice over there. And then we're also going to mirror this. And you can see that, yep. This is mirrored in the character sheet as well, and that makes things so much easier that we don't have to kind of bend that around on the other side either. So I'm going to just copy our entire strand, kind of like this. And this other strand's going to be our green. So it'll be about here. This is clearly more rotated, so I'm going to do this. I'm even going to scale it up a little bit, like that. And then we have no idea where this ends up, but I'm just going to improvise. Rotate that way. And I kind of want it curving a little bit differently, so I'm going to leave it rotating these pieces is very difficult. But yeah, have it be like that. And then make sure that it kind of matches the path of the strand over here. And then another kinda in, because I copied it from the previous one, the y-axis positioning on this is going to be different. So I'm just going to do different things here. They should not intersect at all. Let's see if we have any context clues. Would that be in front of... Yeah, okay, so we know that the green is actually in front of the pink. So do this. And it's fine for it to clip back over here, as long as in the spot that it is in front, it is actually in front. Which would be... Yeah, here, around where the, like, arm belt is. And we know from here as well that at the tip end, it's also going to be in front. So I'm going to grab this. So as a result, we also kind of know where it's going to end here. It's following nicely enough, so... I'm actually going to switch to the other frontal display of my reference sheet. And I'm going to just see how this lines up. It lines up very decently, so we can kind of get more information. We don't have to improvise as much. Even though I liked the solution, this is going to be more accurate to the character. Alright, like that. I am going to re-enable my original frontal reference. And I don't think we have a green yet. We don't, so I'm going to find... I do still have my reference sheet open in an image editor. So I'm just going to color pick that green. I'm going to say it's this in the hair clip. Because I don't think I'm going to get a clean color from the hair. And then add another material. Have it be hair highlight green. And then it's going to be this one. And if we take a little bit of a render break here, just with this kind of basic thing of doing the sides of our back of the hair, this is actually poking out a little bit, so I need to fix that. That needs to be behind, unless it's visible in the back reference, which is not. So I think this here needs to be moved here, like this. So now, if we have ourselves a little render again for a morale booster, we can see that even with just a couple things, just a couple little things of doing this, these side strands of back hair, and then these very tiny little highlighted pink and green ones, it's already looking so much better. Like, I'm not 100% on board with this middle sketch I've done, but that's reversible. And I'll see what we can do with these two big old clumps over here. So again, let's take a look and see if we've got any other information we can glean from this. I don't think we will. Other than that, this here actually ends up getting forked at the very end. So I think that would add a little bit of nice detail as well. I'm going to switch to my other frontal reference again so that I can kind of position this correctly. So it ends up around here. That's unnecessary verts. It rotates kind of like this. We need another loop here. And this loop, as a result, can move further up. And then we add a loop there. I'm going to say it splits at the very end into one, and two little ending spikes. I want them to be spikier though, kind of like this, and I want that to be sharper. And like that. So now, let's once again go and take a look, switch our ref sheets around, take a look. Can we find anything else, any other information? That might be a separation point there, and it would be mirrored on the other side. So this here might just be an alternate hairstyle, or it might be where the side things that we've done separately start. I'm not going to pay that too much mind. It will not help. So. I'm going to add a loop there. Have this be a longer strand that kind of flows. And this is, again, just kind of eyeballing things and trying to come up with things. Like, just seeing what would maybe look cool. I want there to be a bigger clump here. So I'm going to have another decently long strand here. Actually delete a couple loops from there. Just kind of have this taper off around here, but have it be wide towards the top. So scale up, and have this kind of be on top of this for a while. And this I want to be a bigger kind of clump, so I'm gonna taper this off to an end. I kind of don't want it to end like that. I want it to have a little bit of personality, so I'm gonna grab it and like pull it to the side like this. And then to the front like this. I think that'll work decent. And we could, I don't think we could anymore. We could have tried, like, mirroring the back of the hair so that we have, well, a clearly mirrored back of the hair. That would have been saving time. I've seen several models that do that, like, all the way down to, like, shoulder or back or ass length hair, and it just mirrored on both sides. But I'm a little bit on the fence with that. It's like, that's difficult to make look good. Like, the just added little bit of randomness that you have when you don't mirror this kind of long style of hair is just going to be more pleasing for the eye most of the time. You can make it work. I've seen it made work. But I kind of prefer this. I'm going to unhide that while I still can. And even though I don't want to mirror things, I do want to kind of follow the flow of things where I already did forget that this is all supposed to be kind of flowing together over here. So I guess maybe I can just have this kind of a bend, but just in the other direction. I really like the way that was going, but no, I will leave it like this. I don't care about the reference sheet. I think this looks better. And I guess I'll try for the rest of them to have them kind of bunch up towards the middle. And if that looks nice, then I might try to bring this in as well. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like that. You can kind of tell that this would be about the level of curvature that we're looking for. But yeah, so even if I'm not looking to mirror things, I am kind of looking to have still a similar style of, okay, the sides of the hair are going to be starting, they're going to be splitting further up than the middle of the hair. So something along those lines. I kind of want to have another thin strip over here. Not as far up, probably about there. Also curving in this direction pretty hard. And just narrowing to a point. Yeah, something like that. And then this would be another bigger one that then curves in this direction. Those series of clicks. So kind of like this. I want to puff this out and curve this out a little bit further, like this. That effect should taper off around these parts. And I'm even going to select all of these and extrude so that we can have a nicer, kind of a spiky tip to this. Because despite the hair being quite straight in places, this is like still very, very spiky. So I don't think we would have like clean cut, like completely rectangular hair anywhere. That's about the most rectangular we're going to get is this, and then especially from the side, what it's supposed to be. So I want the back of the hair to be spiky. I think this split might be a little bit too much, so I'm going to undo that. Have it split a little bit further down. I'm going to bump up the BGM a little bit because I can barely hear it myself. And then any kind of dents that we have accidentally created, I'm going to fix as well. Like, it's nice that the hair has a little bit of natural, like, bumpiness now. It's not a completely straight line. But I don't want it to be too lumpy either. More like flowing with, not dents, but something rather along the lines of this, maybe. Yeah, like folds and creases like that. So I'm going to sprinkle in a couple of those. Especially heading into splitting points like that. And then where possible, I'd like to... Well, that's got plenty of curvature already. So emphasizing it like this is not going to really have that much of a point. Unless I kind of like that, honestly. So do that for at least the bigger pieces of hair here. And these pieces that don't have anything running through the middle, I don't want to do that for right now. I can do that later, once we are able to apply our modifiers. This doesn't curve enough compared to the rest of them, so I'm going to have a much more pronounced curve. I also think this should be a little bit more to the front, like this, so that we get a nice little layering effect. Kind of same for this, I want this to be layered further as well. Like this, and then like this. It's a bit of a dent for no reason. I'm going to buff these out. Kind of do want another piece over here, like this. And then another one on this side for, like, some level of symmetry's sake. That adds a nice little bit of detail. This could be bumped a little bit, smoothed. This can be smoothed like that. And this in turn could be a little bit sharper. Yeah, more like that. And curve quite enough for my liking. I have a feeling that this could be, this massive one here could still be split into... Yeah, it could. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of have it split over here. But basically just like this. Just for the sake of having a split. They're going to be very close still, but they are still going to be separate pieces. Meaning that this and this are going to be the biggest pieces remaining, and I think those look fine. Some of these middle splitting points could extend further up here, like I could rip that open. And then rip that open. No, but that would mean those are on the same line. Just manually kind of pull this further down. Now that has a bump. Take a look at it from the side. I don't really care how it matches from the side. Like, not at all. But just to make sure that we kind of have the general, like, flow of the hair, where it does, like, pulls to the body, and then away from the body and back to the body. So that's the important part. I'm not even going to try and match any of these to the reference sheet. And this is hair here. So I'm going to have a render. And I'm very happy with that back hair. Like this, there could be plenty to do with the front hair. Especially now that we have the back hair here as well. The side pieces could flow a lot more nicely with the back. And then this section over here is still not ideal. I wonder if I would be able to just pull these up a little bit and try and make it disappear. That would be nice. Right, how would that look then? Not ideal, but we'll live with it. The important thing is that we should be able to bump. Okay, I am going to add. I have to add a loop here. I have to have some detail here. And that's not a bad thing either. Like, I'm gonna have to buff this, or rather turn this spiky again. But that's not a big deal. And now I have something over here that I can actually manipulate and use it to kind of hit our reference sheet from the front. So I'm, of course, going to need an identical one from this side. And I'll just also give this some more volume. So that's fine. And then use this to this here to get to where we need to be on the volume on the front. Matching the volume from the side, so that is great. I'm going to smooth all of these a couple times. And use this to pull this side back to shape. And this for the other side. Get this back to the front. just patching up all of these bits that are showing skin. Okay, that's a lot nicer. It's still a bit of a jarring transition from this very detailed, several pieces of hair front to their very smooth back. But that's fine. We will fix that when the time comes. If we can't fix that on mesh level, we're going to fix that on texture level. So now I'm going to spend a little bit just tweaking the frontal hair still. But right now, as it stands, I'm pretty certain that we've hit our target. So hair's going to be done this session. So next session, we're going to be able to move on to working on the body and working on working on stuff that I enjoy a whole lot more than working on hair. And once we're done with hair and can move on to body and clothing and so on, progress is going to be booming. Like, no more one session per thing. It's not going to be, we're going to be spending this entire session on doing the body. It's going to be more like we're doing the body and these pieces of clothing. So, we are moving along. But I'm going to spend a while here now trying to get the hair to the best possible point it can be got to. That's looping again. I also want to try the smooth modifier on some of these now. So let's start with this one. Give it a smooth, twice, and thrice. You see, that smooths it out really hard. But what I want to do is I want to see what would happen if I smooth it and then try and pull it back to shape. Would that look any better than when it looked before? The one problem here is I've already forgotten what it looked like before. But we'll find out. I have to. I want to have it before solidify. Yeah, I don't think smooth is going to be working out here, because let's see, it's like that. It was like this. Yeah, I'm not going to do the smooth. It would help a little bit with this angle, but then by the time I'm undoing the damage it has done to like the shape of the hair already, I would end up in the same exact position. So I'm gonna ignore smooth for now and just try and do this by hand. I have used it successfully on hair before, so it is just a case-by-case basis. And it might also depend on when you like start using the modifier. Like I've already put so much time into the hair that at this point basically what I'm saying is I should have used, if I wanted to use smooth, I should have used it after the very first like sketch of a piece of hair, and then add smooth, and then pull back into the right shape. I can see that the eyelashes are floating, so quickly fix that. There was something here that yeah, okay, yeah, I do remember them being completely out of sync with the ref sheet because of the shape of our eye sockets, and I just decided that, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll deal with the fact that it's not in sync with the ref sheet. I will rather stick with my existing eye socket shape. Poking through a little bit over there. Alright, and now they're glued back on. The gap over there. This kind of needs to be flattened a little bit. I once again wonder if smooth might be able to help here. No, it just gets rid of the geometry, so I'm going to have to kind of go in like this and pull it back. So this one underneath, yeah, that's part of the reason why that would be so bumped up. Just using good old regular smooth instead of the modifier. Yeah, okay, so I didn't accidentally undo that. I want this curving more along with the back hair. Like this. And then I need to do something with this tip here. Alright, that's a lot better already. I kind of think we need another loop here. That's still a little bit unnatural. This looks a bit odd. I also kind of don't like how this dives in over here. Although I think this piece is supposed to be on top. Yeah, definitely. So I guess this is fine. I do kind of want it to be more like this still, though. Now it's tucked in there, nice. But then now that I've done that, this is a little bit high up. And so is this. And so is this. Once again, seen from here, there's a little bit, like this side is a little bit more puffed out than this side. So I kind of want to do something about that. Although, unfortunately, this is the one piece we have here to work with. That's supposed to be riding really close to the skin, but that has helped a little bit. I think what I want to do is something along these lines. That's helped a little bit. Yeah, these are still... If I select these two, for example, the front hair is still floating a little bit, but I think that's fine. It doesn't look that bad. There's some skin poking through now. I do want this on top of that piece, though. Check it out in rendered mode. That gap is a little bit obvious. What's going on over there? Oh, it's poking through a little bit. And this can be brought in a little bit further. Or rather, this might be... I can probably bring this one up higher. And then back to render to see if that's done anything. That's a bit weird. Yeah, I think that's better. And then let's see how this behaves. It just kind of flows in there. There's not a better option for this at the moment, so I'm leaving it like that. Honestly, I think we're done with the hair for now. Because if I were to start moving around vertices, trying to fix all the things that catch my eye as slightly unnatural, we'd be here like 5 hours. So I'm going to call that good, and I'm just going to say that once we have a body and all of that, and once we start texturing and all of these pieces of hair are combined so that there's no obvious seams anywhere, stuff like that, things are going to look that much nicer. So doing a one last once over, I think this is a little bit harsh, and now it's a little bit better. Yeah. I think this is a little bit too bumped up as well. Yep, happy with that. I'm going to save that as 05 hair done. And with that, I don't think there's any point in starting the body now. Even though it wouldn't take an hour to do the body, I kind of want the body to be its entire own thing. I want this session to be entirely hair, and then just start the body in a fresh session. So I'm gonna call it here. That's a session. So in the previous one was like 3.5 hours, and this has so far been 2.5 hours. So in a combined 6 hours, we've made it to this point where we've got a head, we've got the eyes, eyelashes, eyebrows, and we've got an entire full head of hair. Which, if you're looking to be making just a head model from scratch, let's say you're in a bit of a hurry, you're in a bit of a time crunch, and you just need a head model for your team. With the amount of pointless fiddling I've done with fixing the issues with the hair and so on, 6 hours ballpark. This doesn't include a texture, but for something like this, you can whip up a texture in about 2 hours. Like, this looks presentable already if you have an outline, because it's not going to look like this when rendered. It's going to, in PES, if you use a shaded shader like Blinn, for example, this is about what it's going to be looking like, and that's really decent. And then if you put in the effort to make a decent texture in a couple hours, or just say that we're using solid colors and an outline, it's going to look completely fine even with a shadeless shader. So that's kind of your ballpark. Once you've done a couple of these, about 6 hours for a head model. And this was decently complex hair as well. Like, I've seen models with hair nowhere near this complex. So that 6 hours kind of varies. But anyway, it is 20 minutes to the cup, so anyone who wants to go and actually watch the cup, I will be releasing you now. Next session is not going to be tomorrow. I know for a fact I'm not going to be doing one tomorrow. But I think, as of right now, the next one would be on Tuesday. And the cup starts at 1700 UTC. I wanted to start 2 hours. Yeah. Tuesday, 1900 UTC is likely going to be when I start working on the body, and when I complete the body and start working on the first couple pieces of clothing, like the top and so on. So that is like 99% sure I'll like once again make a reminder post in for CCG and possibly in the VGL server as well. But yeah, ideally I'll be back on Tuesday with